Hi guys, and welcome to a new video. In this video I'm gonna show you one of my most recent wins against the London system. I hope you will all enjoy this video because the London system it's widely popular these days, and it's good to have some countermeasures in the opening against it, but also have some ideas in the middle game and to understand how can you beat this system in a clean strategic way. So let's dive into the game, and this started with d4 knight f6 bishop f4 move order. I played d5 and soon tried to trade the bishops on d6. My opponent played one of the typical moves, which is bishop g3, and I chose my favorite setup, which is queen c7 and knight d7, aiming for the e5 push later. The e5 push is a very common concept against the London system because you're achieving several things with this push. Once you push e5, we do not only get a space advantage in the center and free our position in the center, we also solve the problem of this very poorly placed bishop on c8. So e5 is a very good move to fight for, and therefore I love this setup because all the pieces are aiming for this push. Still, we need to be a bit careful, and I usually try to castle first as there are no intermediate checks on b5 any longer. My opponent here decided to castle as well, and I already don't like this decision that much, and I will shortly tell you why. So white castled. Now, of course, there is nothing wrong with e5. That's the first drawback. Black is equalizing quite comfortably, I think, and white really got nothing out of the opening. However, and that's a general rule which I gave to myself, black can even get an improved version, and this is all about when to trade on g3. And my rule of thumb here is always take on g3 once your opponent has castled, because then he can no longer make use of the h-file because the rook is no longer there. So usually castling short is a signal move for me to take on g3 because a double pawn there is usually a weakness. Maybe not the pawn itself, but for example after this trade, white is never ever able to control this g4 square. This can be quite practical for me. If I put a bishop there, I get never harassed by h2, h3. Also, if I put a knight there, it can stay there forever. And also, sometimes the h-file is interesting for an attack. I will show you how. And also the other way around is even worse, usually because the pawn chain is split into two parts. One here and the other one on the right side of the f-file, and the e3 pawn is especially weak after e5, and we soon see that this weakness might tell in the short-term future. So my opponent, of course, took off the h-pawn, but I could free myself with e5, solving all the problems, having more space, and being able to move the bishop out quite comfortably. He and most players do this, attack my queen with knight f3, and I went to h5, especially since I don't really need to be scared of any attacks with g4 and so on. So my queen could basically also stay there forever. I thought something like bishop e2 would be more solid, but again, my bishop can stay forever, and the best thing white can ever hope for here is kind of neutralizing my bishop. And at such point I was having ideas of lifting my rook and maybe even using the h-file. If this doesn't work, I can also just keep the rook here and try to play with the rooks in the center, and maybe push d4 at some point, or just try to centralize more and more, and then maybe jump here, or reroute the rook to h6. So let's go back to the game and see what happened. After queen h5, my opponent played knight h4, trying to go for an endgame because he maybe felt that there might be some attack against his king coming. and I decided not to allow the endgame, but play bishop g4. Now, after bishop g4, he needs to make a decision. If he goes back with knight to f3, he just gave me 2 moves for free, so he doesn't want to do that, of course. So I guess that he should have moved the queen, or maybe, yeah, just commit that he made a mistake previously and go back anyway. However, he played a move and I was very happy about it, which is f3. Of course, my bishop needs to move back, but when we think about the statics in the position and that pawns cannot go back, we will soon realize that this f3 move leaves some horrible damage to white's position, because first, this knight will never go back and thus is stranded at the rim, because also f5 is not available yet. And also the e3 and g3 pawns are more vulnerable, especially the one on the e file. So one plan for black could be to put more and more pressure against e3, while maybe also eyeing the knight on h4 and maybe trapping it at some point. So let's see what happened. I just brought my rooks over, and now I played queen e5, which is kind of okay, maybe not 100% best, but quite natural. I played h6, g4, queen d6, sidestepping the e-file, because yeah, the queen was not threatening anything there any longer, and I wanted to sidestep some f4 with time gain. Now there is no f4 as g4 would drop. So my opponent decided to jump with knight f5. I just took, and I continued this very logical strategy against the weakness on e3. So I doubled my rooks here. And my opponent defended with king f2. At this point, for now, I had put the maximum pressure against e3, and I needed to find a plan to make progress. And I also needed to keep in mind that he might create some counterplay along the h-file. Rook h1 and g5 might be coming. So once I saw this idea, I saw he might attack me on the wing, and I might not have all the time in the world to put more pressure on e3. And here I want to introduce another rule of thumb, a general principle in chess, which you can apply always when you're attacked on the wing and there is no real justification for it. And the principle is, once you're getting attacked on the wing, you should try to open the center at all costs, because then the pieces will be busy and they won't be able to purely focus on the wing attack. Also, when the center is open, the pieces which concentrated their forces at the rim, they will not be in the center very quickly. So usually you will gain a big advantage in the center because you just have more pieces to join. And yeah, so it's no surprise that this also worked here. If you want to challenge yourself, you can think about it. How could black try to open the center in the best possible way? And again, when opening the position, you should consider your pawn breaks. And there are not so many, so it's d4, which I considered. And the key thing I was calculating about was takes with the c pawn, and then trying to keep it as close as possible. Because all other stuff, when it's getting open here, like takes, pawn takes, and the e-file is open, we already see that white has no chance delivering checkmate along the h-file, because in the worst case, I could just trade everything on the open file, and he's getting distracted because center is so open. So that's why he also chose the most principled approach, taking on d4 and trying to keep it closed, as I expected. So now, still, it has become a bit more open than before. So what we did was not a failure. The king is more open here. There might be some open diagonals, some checks, and also the second rank is more open. The c-file is open. So we took a step into the right direction strategically. So now there are already many solutions. I decided to go for queen. No, not queen to f4 yet, but pawn to d3, getting ready for some checks here. And my opponent tried to continue his plan, and now I just went for queen to f4. So queen to f4 has several ideas. First, it's slowing down the attack because I'm covering the g5 square. After g5, I could just take the queens and take the pawn. There is no mate any longer. Also, I threaten a lot of stuff like knight takes e4 because the f-pawn is pinned now with, opening the e-file and thus a crushing attack. My opponent tried to counter-attack my pawn. I could now have taken on e4, but I didn't, and instead played rook to c7, trying to launch a mating attack via the second rank. He played now g5. I think this was already desperation. He wants to get the queens off because he saw his king is in bigger danger. Now I played this check, and now I played it safe, trading queens, winning a pawn, and not going for more complications like this, which was also possible already. So I took, rook took, I took with a gain of time. Again, I gained some time hitting the bishop. Now I expected e5, trying to get rid of this pawn here, but he instead played bishop h3, and I just tried to open more. Now the structure will break, and I will take on e4 finally, or as in the game, I will take on g4 first and then take on e4, and I got a winning position. My rooks are too active. Rooks on the second rank are usually a very, very big asset, and they often win the game. Now white restored the material, but this won't last for long. And now, if you're not familiar with this yet, you can pay attention to how to collect all 4 pawns in one go. So let's have a look at this technique. Practically, you can also take this pawn and win the game, but I consider this is very bad technique, as you can pick them up with the gain of time. So I played rook f2 check. As the king cannot go to e1 because it's mated in 1, king must go to g1. And already now we pick up the pawn with check, which is of course better than to pick it up without a check. So there followed king to f1, and again I did not pick up the pawn immediately, but first gave a check, king goes to e1, only move, and then pick up the pawn. Now you could argue, okay, but now this time we don't pick up the pawn with a check. However, we pick it up with a mating threat. So white is not ready to counterattack anything or protect any pawns, as there would be mate. And if white defends here, we do the same game again. Check, king must go to e1, and we pick up the pawn with a mating threat. Again, it's him to move, but he cannot really do anything productive, so he must go back. But we will be ready to capture the 4th pawn, and we really took them all by force. So the game ended in a different way. My opponent did not go for king f1 again, but instead play a4 and was mated with rook to g1. So that's it about my London game. I hope you could pick up some ideas, got some confidence in how to win middle games against London, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.